Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Show, where we interview global thought leaders on business, leadership, and life. Here's your host, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and chief burnout officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, Michael Levitt.
Welcome back. I've got Jennifer Christner on the line. Jennifer, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks. How about you?
I am awesome. Really looking forward to this conversation. As we kind of hinted in the show notes and all that stuff, this might be a bit of an improv type of conversation in more ways than one. So
there you go.
Why don't you share with the audience a little bit about you, and then we'll dive into the conversation.
Sure. So I'm Jenny Christner. I'm actually a pediatrician, except I don't practice anymore. And I basically got to a time in my life where I had achieved pretty decent success, but I wasn't totally happy. And I think people from the outside looking in probably wouldn't have thought that, because everything kind of looked, like a Facebook perfect life, right? And I was reaching a milestone birthday. And at that milestone birthday, I decided, I'm going to go take an acting class, because I did that when I was much younger, and I just wasn't really doing anything that was like brought me joy or, that, made me feel alive. And so I was terrified beyond words to go. My husband had to basically push me out the door. Even when I got there, I remember sitting in my car. I didn't even know if I was going to get out of my car. And so I did, and it was just fantastic. And there was other people there who were just like me and, my age, and who were scared and, all the stuff. And we had a great time together. And from that acting class, then I decided to take a look at improv. And I had never done improv before, and I just fell in love. It was awesome. So
Improv's blast, because it's literally it's unscripted. You have no idea what someone's going to say, or if you're bantering between 2 or 3 or 10 or however many people, you say something and then they say something that it just throws everybody off. I always love seeing that, especially those that, have done it for, for a long time. And it's like, how in the world are they able to do that with a straight face?
Yeah.
And because they are professionals at it, but every once in a while, one will get caught because they'll say something and it's like, why did that set them off? That doesn't even seem funny, but it does. And of course, everybody laughs. And you knowing medicine as well as you do, laughter is definitely a really good medicine for us, and it makes us good. But improv can be utilized, of course, what many of us are familiar with it, and comedy and shows and things like that. But improv with organizations and teams is something that I think really needs to be emphasized a bit, and that's the work that you do. So why don't you talk about how you I don't want to say fell into that type of situation, but how did you get involved with doing that and utilizing your improv training in a team environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what you just said is so key. So it's, somebody says something and then somebody says something back, and they just make it look so natural. And I think I fell in love with improv for a couple of reasons. One, it's because, I'm a nerd, and there's actually kind of a science to it. It's not just getting up there and talking. And that's fascinating to learn kind of the rules of improv and how you mess it up when you're learning. And so when you see these people who do it so wonderful, I'm just thinking you just watch them to see all the things you learned. And so one of the key principles that then it was hit me hello, this is so important for teamwork, is when your partner says something, the classic is you say yes, and you add to the conversation, right? And I think so many times in business or in teams that aren't operating well, when somebody starts to talk, the very first thing you start thinking of is your mind shuts down. You're not even listening anymore, and you're just thinking about how you're going to rebut what they had to say, And so, in the first, and even if this is the only rule of improv you ever learn, it's the yes and that automatically does not shut down conversation. And so that was something I immediately realized that you could apply to groups. I'll say one other thing too. One of the things that you learn very early in improv is that a lot of people, when they're doing scenes and you're nervous up there on the stage, you don't know what to do, and you kind of get into an argument with your scene partner because it's, well, I think this and I think, and that tanks it. It it tanks it. If you watch the greats, they never are arguing when they're doing an improv scene. And so that also, harkens back to relationships and teamwork. And when you're in a meeting together, that doesn't get you anywhere either, right? And so there was just immediately, as I started to learn more about it, I was just thinking about how the communication skills and the listening you have to do in improv totally applied to the workplace, like 100%. Yeah.
I can think in the back of my head countless examples of meetings or team meetings where the ones that were successful had an environment where it was supportive. Yes, there were some differences of opinion, but they were able to navigate and negotiate and come up with solutions that appeased everybody instead of the coming up with excuses and rebuttals and this won't work because two people of the 200 people that we serve in this department won't be able to do that. So we can't do that. It's like you're making a policy for two instead of all of them. It's like Spock told us the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Now the next movie,
who knows?
Kirk screwed that up and changed it back. No, the needs of the few outweigh the needs of the many. I'm like, wait a minute, you're confusing people. We're all going to get dyslexic. You're like, wait a minute, what is it? Is it yes or and or? But it's this and yes. So, but it's just in going back to the meetings where if you have that type of mindset of just listening and saying yes, that's a valid point. And we could also look at it this way. It opens things up. It opens up the lens. It expands it a little bit more for everybody. And they'll say, you know what? I didn't think of it that way. That makes a lot of sense. And it gives us more awareness and it gives us more, I guess, buy-in and uniting. Because I know, and I know you see this too, everything in the media right now is not a yes and it's a no and this. There's no yeses anywhere unless they're saying yes to what they believe in and no to everybody else, and there's no variances allowed. And I think if we approach things in an improv yes and type of world, I think we would find, and this is my belief, hopefully I'm not wrong, but all of us have a lot more in common than we have different. Doesn't matter what side of the political fence or beliefs or COVID, non-COVID, shot, no shot, mask, no mask, all the things that we hear about are bombarded with in these last few years. We have a lot more in common than we don't. And it's just getting to yes, I understand your thoughts on this. Here are my thoughts on this. And I think the dialogue would be a lot cleaner and healthier if we all did that, especially in a team environment, but just in society as a whole.
Right. And I think one of the misconceptions people have too, when you take this to a team environment, is that, well, if I say yes and, in that type of a situation, then I'm saying I agree. And that's not what it is, right? You're like you're validating someone, you're being respectful, but you can easily say yes and, not yes but, because we actually do this exercise where you just have a conversation. We have little things you pull out, maybe it's about a birthday party or whatever it's about, where you have a conversation with someone where you just say no and you shut it down. You say yes but, or then you say yes and, right? And people are immediately you do brief about how people feel after that, right? And even if you do a yes and but suggest something a little bit different, it's still a completely different conversation than if it's a no or yes but. Totally different. And in fact, that's when I remember, and again, it didn't hit me till I did the improv, but way back when I was at some leadership training about something, they talked about when you're going to use a phrase where you're about to say but, to always insert and instead of say, and I was like, that's improv, right? That's what we just learned. And another thing that you really learn too is if you watch some of the greats do it, they just somehow magically, stop and let the other person speak and they don't talk over each other. That's another key thing, is not like talking over each other. Let somebody have their piece, let them say what they need to say, and then you respond. So it's just so much common sense stuff. It's amazing. Yeah. And
the word no is something that we hear at a very early age when our parents tell us no, don't touch that, don't do this. So we're comfortable with the word no. And it reminds me, I don't know why this came to mind, but I was talking with my mom not too long ago, and she had a conversation with one of her former neighbors, and they have a young family, and they're one of their kids' little 3-year-old daughter. And the dad was explaining to my mom, it's like, yeah, we told her that, no, you can't do this. Or she said, no, you can't do this. He was going to try to, correct their behavior. And the little 3-year-old looked up and, imagine the size of a little 3-year-old pointing up to the parents and said, no, and of course they had to leave the room because they were crying and laughter because it was the funniest, cutest thing they've ever seen. Like, well, how do we come back from that? And they approached it in a more, this is why we're not comfortable you doing this, because you could get hurt or whatever the case may be. So it changed the conversation. Yep. And the yes, but, or the no's, if we can look at those and go, okay, saying no and say, well, that's a good idea, but I think at this, I just screwed up. I said, but, and see, I got some work to do too.
There you go, right?
See, I'm learning as we talk. That's why I love doing these. You learn from these, but explaining that in a way where it's, again, open and not closed, I think is one of those things that really makes organizations and teams healthier, and it strengthens the conversations on a variety of different things. They can be really big situations or minute things, but I think if the conversations were healthy, it makes a big difference.
It does. And I think one of the best things about doing this in a retreat-like setting or coming in for a workshop is, oftentimes at a company retreat, there's a keynote speaker and there's some rah-rah, and then there's a series of meetings, right? And it's just like, by the end of the day, you're exhausted, you just want to leave, and so what's really fun about doing these sorts of workshops at a retreat or if you're just having a professional development day or whatever, is everybody laughs. I guarantee you everybody gets up and moving. And what we have found is when we first go in, people are very wary. It's kind of like if you go to a professional development conference and they say you're going to role play, and everybody says they have to go to the bathroom and they never come back, right? Because they don't want to do it, And so I've done that before. I've done other conferences where we're like, okay, and after the break, we're going to come back and role play, and then half the people are gone, right? When you come back from the break, it's like, wow, but this, I can't escape usually in the retreat. And we have exercises and everybody is super wary at first. Oh my gosh, they're like, what are we? And so we usually start off with something fairly tame at the table, or we demonstrate something. And I am telling you, people are laughing and they're enjoying each other in a little bit of a new way, and maybe seeing some things about their coworkers that maybe they didn't see before. And it's just great to see the teams laughing. It's great to see that. And the energy in the room and the vibe in the room just automatically is elevated. And we do take it back to something, at the end, we usually close with, because a lot of times people are doing the exercises and sometimes they don't always see the correlations. So we make sure that we pause towards the end and really talk about the correlations of the exercises we've done, how you can apply them to the workplace. And then we have them come up with a rules, literally a rules of engagement for their meetings. So they work together and they come back and they say, okay, these are going to be our rules of engagement for our meetings now. And then and that usually, then the mood is a little bit more somber. So we try to end then with something, get them back, happy before it stops. Because it does come back, and it's been, I guess, it's surprising, but I guess not, that sometimes we uncover some kind of heavy things when we're talking about these things, about interactions. So it's really useful that way.
Oh, definitely. And I've been part of conferences where the energy isn't the greatest, and say, now we're going to do role play. I'm like, okay, during the break, I'm going, can I make the 1 p.m. showing at AMC? What movies are on there? Any movie, I don't care. Even if it's a movie I can't stand it. Oh, it could be even foreign language. Anything's better than this. I need to, that's why I always tell people, it's like, sit towards the back, especially if you need to escape. Then that way you're kind of out. But it doesn't work if you're the keynote, though. I found out it's like, oh, you're up next. You're like, Oh, wow.
No, I do the same thing. I will confess, I try to sit in the back and always on an end, right? The aisle, like you have to be on the aisle if you're in one of these in case you have to make a quick escape. But no, you cannot quickly escape ours. But you won't want to. You will not want to after we start. So yeah. So
exactly. It's engaging in it. Like you said, it can bring up some maybe past traumas or past experiences or some unaddressed things that every organization has. There's that junk drawer that everybody knows about. They know what's in there. They don't want to deal with it. And sometimes events like yours opens it up and say, okay, let's work through this. Yeah. But I know you do this. You create a safe environment for that to happen. Still uncomfortable, but it's safe. Yeah. And then what that does is once they start working through that and the heaviness of all of it, then they can start working on some things. And it's one of those barriers that every organization seems to have. There's something in pretty much every organization that I've ever seen that is like, oh yes, that. Okay. Yes. We don't go down that hallway. Okay. Why not? What's down there?
Right. Well, and that very true. So we actually just did one at a place where there had been recently some people let go, and it was a very heavy feeling about. There's lots of feelings about that, as you might expect. And so we kind of worked through that in a sideways way, but I think by the end everybody got what we were doing. And we almost always talk to the people in charge and just say, what are some of those issues that we might want to uncover? Because we do a part of it is we do some case studies that are applicable to the group, and then do some improv around those case studies. And so it's very helpful. And we do it in such a way that it's, at first, I'm not sure they see it coming, and then it becomes, like, I know what we're talking about now. And but I do think everybody feels much safer. And after you've had a chance to build just some of that collegiality and you've laughed together a little bit, it's a safe place to share things that maybe are uncomfortable to do otherwise. So.
It's always nice when they come into it, they're not necessarily understanding what the outcome is going to be. Because if they know what the outcome is, they're like, you know what, I already know how this is going to go. Right. And they're not going to even bother they might be there, but they're not there. They're on their phone, or they're daydreaming about something else, or looking at, the next showing of whatever movie, at whatever the case may be. But when you're like, okay, let's just work through this. Let's go and see where this leads us. Because even as a facilitator or a coach or anything, we have an idea where things end up. But I remember every session that I've ever been a part of where either I was leading it or I was just a participant, the coach says, I didn't expect us to end up here, but I think that's the right place for us to end up. 100%. And that's when it's like, okay, that was a really meaningful session because it worked through some things for people. Yes. And I real quick story, I worked in an organization a decade ago, and the CEO and I was the CEO at the time, completely different personalities. Completely. And we went through, one of those team assessments. I think it was called True Colors. I think it was that one. And her and I came out as the same color. She argued with a facilitator for 45 minutes on how that was impossible. It got to the point where he dismissed the rest of the team so he could just sit through there. I'm like, I'm going to hang out on this one because I was finding it absolutely humorous, and I could see, she couldn't, but I could see why we landed that way. So there's no way he's that color. And then he went through everything. He said, here's this. And she goes, yep. Well, here's his scores. He feels this, here's this. And she finally believed, but she couldn't reconcile it. And even to this day, a decade later, I think if I ran into her, she probably still wouldn't be able to reconcile that we were the same, because she didn't see me as the same, because my approach to leadership and how I am with people and all that were different. But that's different, in how you are with people and what that particular assessment was testing on, but it still bugged her. And even to this day, I talked to some colleagues there and they say, oh yeah, she was mad. I said, look at it this way. It carved off 45 minutes for you guys. You could go to Starbucks and get some coffee. And, I texted you and say, okay, come on back, and you guys got an extra break after the break. Yeah. So to work through whatever, past trauma she had on that particular thing. I don't know why it bugged her, but it did. But anyway, but that's one of the beautiful things about this when you're working with people is helping them get from where they are to a further along in a destination. And it's a power. It's such a gift to be able to do that.
No, it's the whole goal, and it's so exciting to see. It's actually really exciting to see their rules of engagement that they come up with. And then we got a picture one time of where they had it posted in their meeting room, and we're using it, and that's the best. I will say one thing is kind of funny is some people actually don't know what improv is, and they confuse it with stand-up comedy. And so I have had times where they say, "Oh, like, are you gonna do your set?" I'm like, "No, there's no set happening here today." So yeah. So that's always amusing too, but that makes it fun. So yes, indeed. Yeah.
So you're bantering with the crowd and you're insulting the people in the front row. That might shorten your time there. Hopefully they gave you a big deposit up front because you're probably not going to get the rest of it, but you negotiate well and you can do that. So if you had one bit of advice for teams to use improv or anything else that comes to mind, what's that one? I know there's dozens.
There's so many, but I'm actually going to say it's listen. And that I actually think that listening is one of the hardest skills to implement, because our tendency is to defend. It's to defend or to want to make yourself look good or whatever it is, so that your brain is just not kind of mindful, not in the moment, and you're not listening. And you miss out on so much. Or I think especially now, like in the days of in Zoom meetings, wow, you can really check out, right? I mean, you can be in a Zoom meeting while you're checking your email, and you're not listening at all. And I think that the listening piece is just so critical, and it's such a source of miscommunication or misunderstanding when people aren't listening. And for improv, listening is you have to have heard what your team partner said to be able to respond appropriately. It's just essential. And so I think that's one of the biggest things for teams.
I think if we all listened, I think the world would be a better place. And we all have a lot of room to grow on that, some more than others. But ultimately, I think if we all did that, our teams would be better, our society would be better, everything would definitely improve. So, Jenny, I've loved this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and this awesome work you do?
Oh, awesome. They can go to our website, which is Christner, CHRITSTNER, I hope I spelled that right, _strat.com. So Christner Strategies, or just Google Christner Strategies.
And I'll definitely have that in the show notes. So Jenny, thank you again for the work you do. It's amazing work and continued success.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Breakfast Leadership Show, part of the Breakfast Leadership Network. Visit breakfastleadership.com for tips on empowering your business and your life.